The purpose of this slideshow is to show how I install the Gotek emulator into my Tyros1 keyboard. It provides the equivalent of approximately 100 floppy disks. It doesn't quite act like a hard drive, but does give you the equivalent of roughly 100 floppy disks in the keyboard at one stage. It is presented to you by Bloody Amazing. You will probably need a 4 GB or less memory stick. Anything over this might be a problem. If you have no experience in these matters, for several reasons, I would suggest that you refer the installation to an IT specialist. For number one, there are access problems, vertical access problems. You must have much manual dexterity. Number two, and more importantly, there is a real danger of electrocution if you are not used to playing with these electrical appliances. Even with this experience, you must remove the power plug from the keyboard and operate on the keyboard away from this power supply. Do not take risks with the electricity. I accept no responsibility for your failure to do this. Number three, can you afford to replace the keyboard should you damage it? They are expensive, and if you damage it, can you replace it? Number four is the cost of the emulator is basically irrelevant. You will see that come up in a minute. So the money that you save both with this installation by buying the Gotek emulator off eBay from Coco Mart was where I bought it. That started with a K, I think, K-O-C-O, for I think it was $33.94. We will see that shortly. Here we are. Yes, $33.94. You'll see in the ad it's suggested that it's suitable for the Yamaha and the Korg keyboards. It's called a 3.5 USB SSD simulator floppy disk drive emulator. Okay, so there is a photo of the emulator as it came straight out of the box. So what you need to do, of course, is remove the old floppy drive from the keyboard. As I said, remove the power supply, work away from the power supply, and remove any other external leads. Turn your keyboard upside down, place it on cardboard. You'll see that I have it on cardboard, but also I have a soft cloth under there so I don't damage the screen. Then it's quite a tedious process removing all these screws from the base of the unit. Put them in a jar so you do not lose them. Take note of where they come from. And secondly, do not let them fall into the unit and flop around in there. You must account for every screws. Do not let them loose in the unit. Okay, so having removed the screws, it is then possible to lift the base away, and you will then find that I have remove several plugs to allow more vertical access. However, that lead there that you see, that big silver lead with the red arrow, is a multi-core lead. For goodness sakes, do not damage this lead. Do not try to remove it. You will wreck your keyboard. It is the scariest part of the whole procedure. You can see that where I am unplugging plugs, I have marked their location with texture color so that I can easily replace them. And you'll see also there I'm untwisting the nylon ties that help to keep the wires in place. Just to allow a little more access. Once again, we see another plug there being removed just to allow the lid to be lifted a little when you invert the keyboard. Okay, so then having inverted the keyboard and lifting it, I then placed a solid wooden wedge very carefully in there. So to keep the upper panel apart, you can't fold it all the way back, and here is our limited access problem. As you can see, there's limited access getting in there, and that is why you really need a short Phillips head screwdriver so that you can get it in there to undo the screws on the top of the old floppy drive cable. Now, once you undo these screws, you will find that the floppy disk will come loose. However, you also need to undo the sticky tape attachment of a lead that runs to the actual keys themselves. So you just need to pull that sticky tape off, and then as you remove the floppy drive and the cradle from the unit by lifting it up and forward, you will need to release the leads at the back, being a large black plug and then a whiter power plug. You will see that in a minute, and you'll see how I've marked them with text to color, red text to color also, so that not only do I know how they realign, but when the floppy drive is out, I can use it as a guide. Of course, the old floppy drive will not go back in because you are fitting your emulator. Okay, so there's just an indicator of how I've marked these plugs before removing them. Okay, so now assuming that you have unscrewed and removed the floppy drive from the keyboard, you can take it away carefully, put it on a bench. There it is, unscrewed, unplugged and removed. You need to undo the 4 screws, goldish coloured screws on the sides of the cradle to remove the cradle from the old floppy drive. Then you need to reattach these cradles to the new emulator, which I did using the black screws that came with the emulator. The current slide shows those 2 screws on one side that you need to remove. Not a difficult procedure. You are simply reinserting the emulator into the old cradle. And there you can see it attached, the floppy on the right and the emulator on the left with the black screws attached. Now, of course, you are ready to reinstall this. This is what we're aiming for, to place it back into the unit. You put it in exactly as it came out, making sure the same screws go in where they came out. Here is the tricky part. That black plug must engage both rows of those fine copper plugs. Now, it is so easy to assume you have it right and just one row attaches. Ensure that the holes of the plug line up exactly with both levels of those copper plugs, and the only other plug, of course, there to reattach is the power lead that you can see marked with red texture. Then, of course, the emulator can be put carefully back into its location in the keyboard, screwed down. As you can see, the screws on top there of the cradle, screwing it back into place, and then you will see how I've used a bit of duct tape to reattach the lead that runs down into the actual keyboard itself. So just operate very, very careful and diligently. Don't rush the job. Okay, so now everything seems to be fine. Everything's back in place. Making sure, once again, have a good look with a torch or something to see that both rows of those copper plugs at the back are properly engaged in the black lead. You need to then start reattaching all the plugs you disconnected. Make sure you take note of them. You can see that I'm reattaching the plug here. There is that scary silver multi-core plug that I'm so scared of. It is probably the biggest problem in the whole procedure. Okay, now once you have it all reattached and all the plugs back into place, and don't forget to redo your nylon tyres if you undid them to allow a little more access, you are now ready to turn the keyboard over, place some of the screws in to hold it together, power up the unit, and you'll probably see the Gotek emulator LEDs light up. At this stage, turn it off again, plug in your memory stick, and then holding in both buttons on the emulator, power up the unit, and then you will see it beginning to count up to 999 as it formats the memory stick. I repeat, the memory stick should be under 4 gigabytes. Okay, so once it has done that, it is then ready for use. You can try just quickly saving something onto it or whatever you want to do there to make sure. Now, it is important that you use level 000 as a loading dock. Do not try and save things onto level 000 because you will need to load things onto the memory stick from your computer at level 000. It's the only level the computer will read without putting a Gotek emulator in your computer. Then you load it into the keyboard, and from the keyboard you load it out to another level. So you'll need to plan this ahead. You might say, I'll allow so many levels for my registrations, so many levels for my sounds, so many levels for my MIDI files, etc. So you need to plan this, and you'll see here some notes that I have written about these procedures and also about how to you can actually use the computer lead directly connected to the Tyros if you want to use the computer to organize things on your memory stick as well. Okay, so there are two ways you can actually load the stuff in. Pause these things where you need to read them carefully. Make sure you understand everything. And as I say, if you are concerned about the procedure, then of course refer it off to a specialist. Now that you're sure everything is okay and everything is working fine, turn everything off, remove your memory stick so you don't break it off, invert your keyboard, reinsert all the screws, making sure your power supply once again is away from everything, and your job should be complete. Please enjoy. The end.